Boy, it feels like it's been a minute, and it has since I've been on stream, but I'm back from my trials and tribulations of a while back, and then hoping to get back in the swing of things again. Welcome aboard. My glass is ready here. What you're looking at on screen is something I've been working on. It's not quite ready for prime time, but I'm trying to finish it up. But I guess I'm sort of pleased with it at the moment until either myself or somebody else pokes all kinds of holes in it. I thought before I get into, I don't know, whatever's going on in the OSR sphere, I could walk through this a little bit. So the genesis of this, there's a few things going on this page. You can see I have a thing about searching. This is all wilderness kind of based stuff, but the one is this area here on exhaustion. And this is really based on my playing in the One Ring. So I've been playing in the One Ring game. I've run a couple of sessions, as I've talked about in the past. And we started a Moria campaign in which I'm a player. And it's been interesting because we get to really delve into things that we haven't been able to do. Because basically in the past sessions, we've been essentially running one-shots where it's really one, you go, you do a thing, you come home and you're done. In my case, the session I ran took a couple of sessions. The adventure I ran took a couple of sessions. But essentially I'm using essentially a lot, but it was one adventure. So we went to a place, came back from a place, and they were done. So there are elements of the system, I think with many systems, that don't necessarily come into play when you're doing kind of one foray. They just don't happen, or they're not really important. You can kind of ignore them. And one of the things that you can't really ignore, and we didn't ignore, but maybe we felt its impact more now that we're playing something more a little bit more extended. I think we've played now 3 or 4 sessions of Moria. I know I had to miss one, but I want to say 3 or 4 sessions of Moria. Is this concept of exhaustion, which I think I've mentioned. So basically, there's in the One Ring, there are a few different tracking pools or numbers that are on your character sheet. There's your, I think it's called endurance, which is essentially your hit points. There is your hope, which is a resource you can spend. There's shadow that you gain when you're kind of interacting with sort of evil effects. And there is exhaustion. And they do some neat things with these. Basically, they have these points where they will intersect. You start off with a good amount of health, good amount of that, what I say was endurance. And then you have I think they call it fatigue. They may not call it exhaustion. They might call it fatigue. And then you have fatigue that basically, if you're at home, you're starting off, you're in Bree. In our case, we started off, where did we start off exactly? I don't remember. We might have actually started off kind of outside Moria, more or less. But you would start from your home base, wherever that is, with basically 0 fatigue. But as soon as you start traveling anywhere, using the journeying phase, you start to bring on that fatigue. And what that fatigue does is it starts to compress your window between these two different resources. So you may have 30 hit points, and you're thinking, okay, this is great. But then your fatigue starts to build up. Oh yeah, I should also say you have encumbrance. And encumbrance is something, you don't get any free encumbrance. Everything you are carrying with you adds to your encumbrance. So it's not like something where I think in a lot of games, like in D&D, you'll be like, well, you can have up to your strength and encumber, in stuff. And then basically, as long as you stay at that level, right? As long as you stay as under your strength, a number of things, and nothing bothers you, right? And then, okay, but then after that, then it starts to creep in. Everything counts. So what happens is you have your endurance. This is your health on one side. That's that's probably gonna be going down a little bit if you have to get in any combats. You got to fight anything, and then you have that fatigue, and then your encumbrance that's piling up on the other side. If those two things meet, then you become weary, I think, or wearied, I think, is the term that they use. And when you get wearied, you become a lot less effective. You're really what it is. So to understand how they do it, and I haven't done any dicing to figure out exactly straight kind of odds, but you in the One Ring, you're rolling a d12 and you're rolling some number of d6s, maybe none, maybe more than one. And then this is where I don't remember, so apologies. I don't know if the weird effect, the wearied state affects only the D6s you roll or the D12 also. But the upshot is that normally what you do is you roll all your dice together and you add them up. And if you roll some 6s on those D6s, they end up doing a good thing. But basically, you add them all up and you're trying to pass a target number. Hey, Technobabble. Or is that Techno? It is Technobabble. Okay, I got that right. Couldn't see it. My glasses, it was a little bit fuzzy for me. Okay, so you got these things coming up. So you hit wearied. And now 1, 2s, and 3s, and again, I don't know if it's on the D12 also or just on those D6s, suddenly they just kind of nothing. So basically, you lose half those dice. You still have them, but you got to roll 4, 5, or 6. Otherwise, they do nothing. And again, I don't know what the odds. I haven't gone and figured out the exact math on that, the probability curve, but it's pretty bad. Now, you can kind of immediately alleviate that. So if you can basically take off equipment. It's one of those things I know that the players in the game I'm playing with, our group, they really appreciate that, those cinematic moments where the guy is exhausted, so he takes off his helm and throws it away. And that's kind of modeled in there because as soon as you take off the helm and throw it away, hey, Croco, you have reduced your encumbrance, which means you may have gotten out of that wearied state. So you could have a lot of fun with that. Now, the fatigue part of it does not go away. So yeah, you could potentially, if you needed to, get rid of all your encumbrance, strip down your skivvies, go running around the mountains, the hills, the dales, wherever you are. You can do that. And of course, you can try to get some first aid, maybe get a little bit of health back, get some rests going on. You can actually get your endurance back pretty quick if you can find kind of a safe-ish place to hole up for a night. But that fatigue, never going away until you do that fellowship phase, which is basically your after rest. So what does this do ultimately? Well, it means that you can't just roll until your endurance gets low or something like that and go. You always going to be fighting these 3 things and figuring out in the case of Moria, where we're trying to maneuver around the mountain, we went and looked at, the East Gate, the Holland Gate, and we saw all kinds of orc activities. So we're moving up the mountains and we're doing all this stuff. But we've got this fatigue that we picked up getting to Moria. So we never have our full hit points. It's not like, I have, like in if you're playing a D&D type game, you might say, I've got 12 hit points. And you feel like, well, however, I can set that bar of when I want to cut bait and run. And especially if I have a healer, I say, whatever, I can get down. I can maybe get down to 2 hit points. And if we got a healer around and we're not, I got to be careful, obviously, but then we can heal up. We can kind of keep going. Well, I may have 30 hit points, my character, but I've got 20 fatigue plus encumbrance. So now I only have a 10 hit point window until I got to think about how am I going to continue? Do we need to get the heck out of Dodge? Excuse me. Croco asked, do I have search rules for dungeons as well? Not in this document at the moment. These search rules that you're looking at, which I guess I can go through them too. Basically, this is all prologue to the exhaustion piece, but I can go over that also. They're pretty easy. There's nothing complicated in there. So I just like it. So I've always appreciated. So you have this. You're balancing these things. Okay, how much? I got my health. That's great, but I got these other things. Maybe not so great. And now I can't. Instead of having a whole band of 30 hit points to play with or whatever, it's like I really, really only have that 10 that I feel comfortable with, because if I get down below there, then I'm going to be in this wearied state. Now I can try to find a camping spot. I can try to find a recover, but it's going to put me, if I get caught up and I'm in that below and I'm in wearied, that's pretty rough. That's a tough one. So, and I like it. And what I like about it is another thing that kind of, to me, slows the game down. I don't mean the pace of actually playing the game, but I just mean the way the game plays, because we had to go to Moria and we did some stuff. We had some fun, but then all that stuff's kicking here. Like, man, we got to go back to rest. But then we go back to rest. When we come back out of the mountain, we got to incur more of that fatigue, which puts a little bit of a timer on there of what we can do that's separate from our hit points. And it's something that, in a sense, it's how do I want to put it? You can play around with, let's say in the One Ring, you can recover all of your endurance pretty quickly. I think if you can get like a night's rest, you can pretty quickly get your endurance back. But like I said, that fatigue doesn't come back. So it's this nice, I don't know. I don't even know what to call it. What's the reverse of a buffer? I don't know. It just sort of eats in there and sits there. And I like it. I like how it emulates this feeling of having really traveled somewhere, right? I'm sort of up and down on I'm mixed on the journey phase. I like what it's doing. There's kind of a skill test and a bunch of rolls, and maybe I have to look at it. I don't know if I want to do something separately, do something differently, but I like this idea that you're building up this fatigue, and then you got to figure out what to do with this fatigue. So I've been thinking about, long way of saying, and I don't think I said it very well, thinking about making kind of a more generic kind of OSR-ish exhaustion kind of mechanic. My version is not right now taking into account encumbrance. I think that's a cool thing too. There's so many, I'm trying to make these things that are kind of plug and play. So there's so many different ways of doing encumbrance now. I didn't want to, and I don't feel like I have something novel to add to the fire. So I'm putting encumbrance out there. But basically, you pick up exhaustion as you do stuff. And mine is modeled more or less for the outdoors, though I have here a bit about dungeons, which is essentially the difficulty of the terrain. And I have 4 levels of difficulty. At certain intervals, and the intervals get shorter in turns, the easier the terrain is, the longer you can go before you start picking up exhaustion. And they're points, so you can just mark them. And I presume if you're playing, for the most part, it could be one person for the whole group. It'll be the same. Theoretically, if you split the party, you might have different exhaustion levels, but otherwise you're kind of ticking them. I guess over time you might have different exhaustion levels because people might roll things or whatever. Things can happen. Anyway, you're marking down this exhaustion. When you've after a turn where you've marked down your exhaustion, you're going to roll. I'm just calling a saving throw right now because again, I'm trying to make this pretty generic. So I'm not saying save versus this or that, so that if you're a referee, you can decide which saving throw is appropriate for exhaustion. I feel like at this point, I can just tell you, just have your players roll a save, and then you, as the GM, can figure out which save you think is appropriate. Save versus death, save, roll under Constitution, whatever. You can do whatever else. So I'm just calling it a saving throw right now. If you fail your saving throw, then you become weary, which means just basically you're going to have disadvantage on everything until you get rid of the exhaustion. And that's kind of the key. Is it's easier to, and deliberately I want to, and the reason why I'm defaulting to saving throw as opposed to just saying roll under something is that I want you to get better at it as you're leveling up. I'm a big on using the progression that's already there. I like things that you get better at as you progress. So I like to always tack on things. So I want to use your level. I want to use your saving throws. They always go up. And if you're using a saving throw versus death or something, then you can even have the classes to play with in terms of, hey, warriors should probably be better at that than wizards. They're made of stouter stuff for the most part. So, you could figure that out. But anyway, if you roll your saving throw, you keep going, but the exhaustion stays. You don't lose those points. They're just not affecting you yet, of course. So you could be doing stuff. Oh, I'm making my save. Oh, missed my save. And then now I've got all this exhaustion. And I'm not making it granular. I just think it's easier. You just have disadvantage. But it's just like, I'm not even really going to worry about it. I think I would play it's disadvantage. If you want to rule that you can get an advantage to get it back, or it's just flat, you're disadvantaged, that's it. Because it's meant to be a pretty harsh penalty. Penalty. You should not want to be wearied. It should not be something like, I'll just keep going. It's like, no, you gotta rest. I mean, that's intentional. It should be kind of tough. Now in the One Ring, you can't get rid of exhaustion until you're sort of back home at the end of your adventure, back home. I don't have that. What I do instead have is essentially camping. Oh, and I do have a note in here. I just say, if you go down to a dungeon, the amount of levels you clear in the dungeon before you come out or clear or go down into, that basically is your exhaustion. So if you go to levels 1, 2, and 3 in a dungeon and you come out, that's 6 exhaustion. I thought they'd be pretty easy peasy, right? And then I have a couple little tidbits. Oh, hey, if your exhaustion is less than your level, then you roll on that saving throw with it. You get to roll with advantage, get to roll an extra die. Oh, and if it's more than but it's more in Constitution. In other words, I've got a 12 Constitution and I have 13 exhaustion. Now you're rolling with disadvantage. So again, that one, it's like you have your kind of your Constitution is in a sense or your natural kind of limit, but then your level is also like, oh, hey, you're high level, so you can do more. And then so that's that part of it. Now I do have I did add this in. So I have a rest and recovery here, which I just came up with some categories for getting rest and recovery. Essentially, with the exhaustion works like hit points. You get rid of them the same way you would gain hit points back through some kind of healing. But once you have exhaustion, you cannot get hit points back until you've gotten rid of your exhaustion. I was thought about putting in some language there about magical healing. I'm just going to leave that to you. If you want to have magical healing because it's magical, right? Someone's laying on hands, they can heal your wounds and not heal your exhaustion. That's fine. I don't care, right? Do what you want. Do what you will. Do what thou will. It's the whole of the law. So go to. But basically, you have to knock down. If you're just naturally resting, at least, you've got to knock down that exhaustion before you get your hit points back, which means you probably want to get rid of it. It's not good to have. So we have some different. So I came up with the different. Okay, let's give some different kind of levels of rest, or I say qualities. The worst is harried, which is you're going to take damage if you fail a save and you can't recover. Ill rested, you roll a saving throw. If you succeed, you get a D3 of hit points or exhaustion. But if you fail your save, you do not recover. If you're just rested, that's kind of normal. I give you 1d3 plus 1 hit points or exhaustion. So you can get rid of either one of those. If you're well rested, you can recover your level plus 1 hit points or exhaustion. And I'd put in minimum 4 because I want each level to be kind of at least better than the last. If you're refreshed, you basically can kick out hit points and exhaustion at the same time. And then if you eat a hot meal, you get to roll any kind of dice you're rolling, like for your the save or for recovery. You get to roll with advantage, so you get a little extra thing in there. And then, so how do you figure out what kind of rest you're getting? Well, that's when the camping part comes in. I'm kind of big on wanting to enforce a little bit of you need to spend time to find a good camp. So if you just are traveling all day and then the GM says to you, oh, winter, evening is approaching. You're like, oh, we just camp. It's like you're not really putting too much thought into it. What are we looking at? Oh, we're going to we'll just camp right here. Okay, fine. So then we'll roll a d6 and we'll see what kind of camp you get. And so I have windswept, and these all kind of have like, well, which kind of rest you're getting. Windswept is, fires. You can't stay lit. You can't hear anything. It's bad. So that's harried. You're not getting much done. Damp. You found a spot and ends up being wet or moist or whatever in a bad way, obviously, soggy. And then you're ill rested. If it's bug ridden, like you get somewhere in the middle of the night, all kinds of tigers or ticks or whatever little biting insects come out. Chiggers, not tigers, chiggers, is that what they are? Little biting insects come out. Well, then you're also harried, so that's not good. You can be exposed, which means basically anybody can see you, and that obviously adds an encounter chance, and you're ill rested. If it's secluded, you're rested, and if it's safe, you're well rested. And if you're wondering, well, I don't see how refreshed is in there. Well, if you light a fire, that improves the quality of one step. So if you're safe and you light a fire, then you can get refreshed. And I thought that was pretty good. I'm pretty happy. I'm pretty pleased with this. Again, I want to slow the game down in the sense that you're not running around the map. I want you to take time to find good camp spots. I haven't decided yet whether I want to put something in here about having kind of semi-permanent camps where you're making kind of what I would call an encampment, where you're actually making somewhere kind of semi-permanent. But it makes sense that you would want to if you found a good spot that's near where the area of interest is. So, you found the Cave of Chaos, and now you've found a spot that's reasonably close, not too close, but reasonably close to the caves. And you found a spot that like, yeah, this is a safe spot. Then you can maybe do something to say, okay, we're not just going to make this one-time deal. And once you kind of do whatever you need to do to mark it, make sure you can get to it again, then you don't have to have this roll. You're just going to have your safe spot that you can come to. And one of the things which I didn't mention as I'm talking about the One Ring, what I liked about the benefit of this system in my mind. So you get this fatigue, right? And so eventually you get this fatigue, you've got encumbrance, you've got your health going on, and you also have your hope, these other resources that you're spending, and you're getting drained, and it's making it so that it's harder and harder to operate well. Hey, you're starting to get weary. Now you're losing pips on the die that just are going to start going to 0. And that can be bad. We were in a combat. It was really close to being a TPK. And one of the things that happened was my character got hammered. We were just getting beaten down. And the thing is, it wasn't that my character went under, but I dropped well below that wearied line. And suddenly I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. I'm like, man, I can't I can't hit this guy. Like I can't. I'm getting whacked, and I'm getting beaten down, and it's gonna be bad. And not only is like, okay, well, we got out of this combat, and like, yeah, we're fine, but now we're in a dangerous spot, and I'm still weary. Like I'm not, when am I going to get hit points back? I need a lot of hit points. It turned out that because we didn't know at the time, we thought we'd have to travel all the way back to town to get the full healing. We didn't. You can kind of take a safe spot, but it was kind of like, man, we got to get back to town. Now going back to town, it also means that we get access to all the they don't call them downtime. And I actually appreciate that they don't call it downtime, because downtime to me, I don't know. I like that. I forget what they call them, but you have these kind of pursuits or things you can do, such as looking up. It might be researching whatever you're fighting. Like, oh, okay, we're trying to figure out Moria. Maybe there's some records here we can look at. Okay, maybe you can just do different things to help you, and you're forced to use that time because we're there for a week or 2 weeks. So it puts you're given this time. And you're like, man, we're chilling out, we're resting. We're getting our things, and now here are some things we can do. And those things can be fed directly into what we're doing. Now, it's not like, I think in a lot of games, it always gets into things like, oh, I'm going to start crafting. I'm doing things. That's fine. I'm not a huge crafting fan, but whatever, that's fine. But those things don't necessarily fold back into the actual adventure. I found that these kind of downtime activities, you could have some that are essentially building for the future, but you also have ones like, no, we can do research. We can do things to help us in our next foray. And we wouldn't have done it if we didn't have forced to. If we could have just stayed out around Moria for the whole time, we would. But the system kind of forces you through these things to pull back, to say, no, we got to go back. Because they're not, and I guess in some ways they're replacing, right? You're not worried about food. You're not worried about certain things. Food's not really an issue. I don't even know if they really track light too much. I mean, they track, like, we have a lantern, which I think gives some effect, but I don't think the idea of light, it's not like in any kind of OSR game we're really concerned about light sources. We're not concerned about rations. So in a way, these are kind of replacing those. I don't necessarily want to replace them in kind of my version, but I like the idea of, you're playing with the stuff, and then you can sort of build up, well, if we got to go home and we're forced to for these reasons, what can we do? Now, in my case, I'm letting you go back in camp. Maybe I'll put a limit on there as how much you do, or something like, once you're at this state, you got to go home, or you got to go somewhere safe, somewhere that's that really is kind of a haven or somewhere. But then once you're there, hey, do some research. Hey, look at the things you can do to help you for the next thing. So I kind of think that the system in the One Ring helps start making you think about, oh, we're going to go home, and that kind of stinks because we're not in Moria, we're back here, but we can do things to help us for the next time going out. And the system kind of pushes you to do that. I like it. I put in this exhaustion thing. I think that's all I have to say about this. I'm trying to finish it up soon. It's not quite ready yet. One other element, I did post this in a couple of places, so I'll share it here, though only part of it was done at the time. I have this thing for herbs where you can roll to create some herbs. I guess any kind of plants. I'm calling it herbs, but it could be anything. This page over here, when I posted it, I only had this table ready. So I posted that table. Now I have the other elements of it, which is basically, what kind of herb is it? And an herb, I'm using it in kind of like, a thing. I don't even know what technically, if I was a botanist, what an herb would be versus whatever, but it can be a tree, a shrub, a flower, a grass, a fungus, a mold, or a lichen. Where does it tend to be? How rare is it? What component is the part that you're using? So, for example, I could roll and say, oh, we have this thing. Let's see. It's a mold. It's in the grasslands. Oops, I roll that again. Let's see. It's extraordinary. So it's pretty darn rare. It's the root, or, whatever the equivalent of the root of some mold is. You prepare it by infusing it, like you make a tea, or you put it in water or something, you crush it, or what do you do you muddle it into something, and then it affects your senses. And because it is extraordinary, this is a pretty major, I said minor, magical effect, equivalent to a third or fourth level spell. So I might look for some inspiration on some third or fourth level spells that this thing might do that affect your senses. And then for the name, let's see, I got 41. So I get, let's see, fire or water. 64 is marsh or swamp. That makes sense. And 52 is slippers or boots. So maybe I'll call it fire swamp slippers. And that might indicate how it looks, what it's about. If I'm thinking about, okay, it's got fire in the name. Does it have something fiery? What's the fire? Crocker says, mash it, boil it, put it in a stew. Yeah. Like, what is it? All that stuff. So I posted it to Patreon. I posted it on the forums. That's part of it. But now, that's just the naming part of it. But now this whole thing. So I have a couple other things I'm trying to get in here also to do that. So hopefully it'll be something that folks will get use out of and enjoy. Brian Smith over on the forums, if I can find it, rolled it a couple times. When this one, see here, this version here, I just had the names, but he came up with a few which I thought were really awesome. One is called Fanged Moon Dagger, a tall succulent plant made up of thorny blade-shaped leaves surrounding a spear of small pale flowers. In the light of the moon, the flowers open and release silver grains of sour-smelling pollen. If harvested and smeared onto a blade, use the sticky gel from inside the leaves. This pollen effectively silvers the weapon for one attack. And then he had, the next one was Holy Sky Curse, a low-crawling leafy plant of pure crimson, difficult to cultivate, but a favorite of holy men, and often grown in the shady places of temple gardens or at the base of secretive windows. If trod upon, the pigment within the leaves dyes one's boots blood red, causing them to leave startling footprints, usually concluding in a stern reprimand to whoever had been skulking where they should not be, which is awesome. In some religious tomes, this herb has been rumored to experience explosive growth in response to a corrupted clergy, ultimately growing thickly over walls and forming a gloomy red haze over the building. And then finally, day rat cap, fuzzy brown and gray mushrooms that spring up suddenly near sewer entrances and rain-soaked city streets, sporting long black anchoring roots resembling rat tails. If disturbed by curious animals or foot traffic, these mushroom caps suddenly spring sideways and roll away, often down into the sewer proper, giving the appearance of a fleeing rat. While harmless above ground, these mushrooms develop poisonous spores if able to find a wet and sunless environment, morphing into the night rat cap, a much more dangerous hazard, retaining their sudden explosive springiness, but with the added threat of spewing toxic fumes as they tumble. I mean, those are all awesome, and I'm only just grateful that my table could provide some inspiration, because obviously 99.99% of that is from his brain, and the 1% is just the names. But I think maybe, I don't have in mind yet kind of an urban environment for these. Maybe I should. I'm not sure where I could put it. Maybe I'll have to put some ors in here so I can put some kind of urban things. So there you go. I think that's the last thing I have. Yeah, I think that's about it for that. Now with that stuff out of the way, appreciate Hannah listening to that. Now we can go and see what's going on in the, where's the OSR? Where's my OSR thing? I did look at this earlier today, and I confess I was not particularly blown away by the topics that were on hand, but we'll look at it again anyway. So Lonriero, I don't know how to pronounce his name. He's actually on my on the Discord. Posted an underwater adventure map that looks quite cool. Has anybody tried White Box? Which White Box is this? I don't know. I have too many White Boxes. White Box FMAG. There's White Box WIGHT. Is that? I don't know which. I don't know. I kind of feel like, I don't know how you guys folks feel, but I kind of, I don't feel like we need any more of the time of the retro clone is over. The time of the orc has begun. I don't know. I feel like there's, unless that retro clone, at this point, I just don't know why I need them. And I mean no disrespect. Or are they talking about the White Box? Well, if it's the White Box, the original brown books, just go for it. But, and definitely don't do the FM, was it Fantasy Medieval, whatever FMAG, because they stole a bunch of stuff from people and didn't credit them properly. Stole's not the right word. It's a whole mess. You can read about it, but don't give them the sale. Go and look at the people whose work that they took credit for and throw them one instead. The time of the future clone has begun, says Croco. Yes, maybe it has. Just that we have the originals. I don't need I don't know. Again, I'll just say this. I'll try to be really brief. But the reason why retroclones began was that people, OSR, right, that is as a movement that's looking back at these older games and reminiscing and wanting to play them again, and recalling from through the distance of time that we really enjoyed those games. Maybe there was some stuff in there that was good. And third edition 3.5 is pissing us off. All those things that we're realizing we don't like. Oh, hey, these older games, they might have had it right. But now, how do I play them? Well, I got my copy, but I lost mine when I was a kid, or it went down in a fire, or got flooded in my basement, or whatever. It's like, well, let me go to see if I get a vintage copy. Oh my gosh, they're super expensive. Well, what can we do? And the retro clones were the answer to what can we do? Well, what we can do is, and it was kind of untried at the moment, was let's see if we can make something really close, but we change enough language, we do things just a little bit differently enough so that Wizards doesn't sue our pants off. And that's what they did. And so you ended up with, you could go down the list of retroclones. And then over time, it became more of there was the ones that were just trying to be straight retroclones to kind of house ruled versions, that sort of thing. At this stage now, 2026, we didn't have, back when this was all going on, there was not, I don't know if drive-through technically existed or not, but there was not the PDF marketplace, the digital marketplace for old games that there is now. Now you can go to drive-through and Wizards has all the TSR stuff, or I don't know, all, but whatever. As much as you could pretty much want out there. You can even get most of them printed on demand. You have access to all the original things. But back at this point, you didn't. So it really was either I got to spend a bunch of money on eBay or somewhere to get copies, or not. And so, like, you know what, we're going to do it. So a lot of them, like Osric in particular, I remember, was not really formatted to teach you the rules or anything. It was basically, they're like, hey, you remember, did you play AD&D? Great. Well, you don't have it anymore, but here's Osric, which is like, it's kind of like a reference document for AD&D, not in a way that would teach you the game or be good at that, but it was basically like, just here's all the stuff. I don't know about Osric now, if they've changed it. And this is mine. I haven't looked at Osric in a long time. So apologies. I'm not trying to denigrate the quality of Osric's authorship, but my recollection was it's basically like, here's just a resource for AD&D. And it worked for that. I remember I joined a game on, I think, Dragon's Foot or somewhere just ages and ages ago. And yeah, I was able to download Osric. I'm like, great, I've got the AD&D stuff. I've played AD&D. And any of you have played a lot of the older D&Ds, even the new ones, creating characters and stuff, it's not all that different, right? So, okay, great. I can play it. But now in 2026, I can just go get the AD&D books straight from, granted, I'm handing Wizards up. Nope, don't go away. I don't know why it does that sometimes, my webcam. If you want to hand Wizards money or not, whatever. But ultimately, you can get the books. So I don't no longer need, a Osric or a Old School Essentials. They were good for the folks who needed them. And they still make good references because they have like online, there's, OSE has, an online rules compendium sort of things. You can look things up, which I'll use often as kind of my first step before I dig out BX. So like, oh, what is it? If I can look really quick and it's obvious in OSE, then I feel pretty good. That's going to be pretty close to BX, but there it is. Croco says, if it doesn't have most of the stuff of the original, that's not a retro clone. Yeah, I like something like Lamentations of Flame Princess. I don't know where I would put that. It is mostly a retro clone. I don't know. It's like retro clone with house rule fixes. I don't know. You could say it's its own game. That's true. I don't think anyone would argue with you. But that's kind of how I guess I just think of it how the progression of things went. So in any case, short story made very long again. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, if you like it, if you like those clones and the way they tell the rules, great. But I'm kind of beyond saying like, oh, should I get S in Swords and Wizardry or this one? It's like, well, what are they doing? And I know some of them add more. So I know like what Swords and Wizardry Advanced or Complete has more stuff. Basically, I get that part of it. But I'm just like, it doesn't. I just go play BX. Okay, I'm looking here at the blog rolls. Is there anything good? Let's see. Pine Box Derby said, I wrote about the reasons my gradient descent game fell flat, and some of my problems with the modules writing. All right, we'll check that one out. I'm not super. Have I read Gradient Descent? I don't think so. It's what's a mothership one, right? So warnings about Gradient Descent by Luke Gearing. Okay. I really like, even if it's a system or module I'm not familiar with, I really like recaps and people analyzing these things. I don't know. I get a kick out of them. So let's read them. Okay. Failure with, you know what? Let me put it in the chat. Sorry. False start, 5-yard penalty, repeat first down. So this is failure with Gradient Descent. And of course, if you've played Gradient Descent, feel free to chime in. It's spoilery, so I guess put me on mute for a bit. So I can put me on mute so I can keep the views while I talk about it. Maybe I'll do, what's that Monty Python sketch where they're trying to give all these complicated hand signals for when they're doing things. So it's always like, I'll do that when I'm done, so you know to unmute. Okay. All right, this is posted from March 5th. Warning, spoilers ahoy. That's fine. On the Usual Tongues blog, I ran 5 sessions of Luke Gearing's Gradient Descent last year, and they kind of sucked. It's a celebrated module, and I'm a decent referee, so what gives? Header to the first. Logistics, and inexperience. There are only 3 players. I can zoom this up a bit, right? There were only 3 players, initially, so scheduling was difficult. Sometimes we'd only play once a month or so, which really messed with the players' investment and decision-making abilities. This is especially bad in a mega dungeon where players are dealing with a lot of information density and interconnection. We were also all new to Mothership, having only played 2 sessions of Daniel Hallinen's excellent Bloom previously. This meant that the mental load compounded. I was running a module I had some issues with while my players were trying to remember previous sessions, and on top of that, we were also all occasionally stopped in our tracks to look up rule clarifications. We struggled to get into a groove. But as I was reflecting on the experience, I also realized that the module's author has made a series of creative decisions that made it tougher for me to run. I thought those might be interesting to explore. First, mismatched expectations. My favorite adventure modules tend to have the following in common. Here you go with the drinking game. Verisimilitude and sense of place or history. I love players being able to reason about the environments they explore, and for those environments to get their hooks into the players. It does wonders for player agency and engagement. And adventure as technical manual philosophy. I don't mean that I'm a stickler for layout or writing style. However, I don't want to run a module that requires a lot of assembly or interpretation. Gradient Descent slightly blindsided me on both fronts. I think due to its production quality and presentation, and its position as one of the flagship Mothership modules. Mothership has a reputation for slick, focused, and playable releases. Because of that Mothership sheen, I didn't pick up on some aspects of Gradient Descent's writing that I should have recognized as being not for me. Hey, Ian, I did survive Florida. Indeed. Unfortunately, I think it's been a week, and I just couldn't get around to it. So I don't know if my tan is really much showing anymore, but yeah, it was good. All right. Writing style. Luke Gearing is an evocative writer, but I struggle with how he structures and prioritizes the information in this module. Let's look at this room key on the first floor as an example. 23G, Employee Rec Center. Scattered gym equipment, shattered mirrors, smells like rust. Equipment locker houses an unconscious person. Heavily patched vac suit, helmet off. Upon regaining consciousness, explains that they and their partner found an artifact, but their partner knocked them out and left them for dead. Artifact is stashed in a random location. I guess we can figure that out on page 21. And then finally, nobody has heard of such an individual passing through the bell, nor the person telling the story. Okay, so getting back. So that's the text from it's a screenshot. That's the text from that, which is from the book. Let me get it. Just a drink of cool water for the working man. The key is written as a mystery. It's intriguing on the page, but a little confusing for a new warden. All right, so before we get into their analysis, I have not read Gradient Descent. I haven't read Mothership yet. It's kind of on my list of games I want to read and do on the channel at some point. So looking at this key, it is now some of this is probably, I know Mothership's supposed to have a very slick design that evokes kind of sci-fi, and probably the layout of this key is partly that. We've got a title that's underlined with, I'm hoping is where would the corresponding key for the map. So 23G, which is I'm assuming is what, if you're looking at the map, we'd look for 23G, and that would be it. I like that they have titles. So we have Employee Rec Center. That's great. We get a few descriptors, maybe, of what's in the room. So we get our scattered gym equipment, shattered mirrors, and we get some sense, right? Smells like rust. Okay, good. Now we get to the stuff. So we have an equipment locker, bolded, so we know that's a thing. And then inside it is an unconscious person. That's in this probably another, I would guess, layout convention, that it's kind of an orange bolded and underlined. Heavily patched vaccine, helmet off. And then we've got more with the little arrow, which I guess is, so I'm guessing, so here it is. So we have this thing with the arrow. So we have a black arrow that's pointing to our equipment locker, right? And then everything is indented within there. So this is all the stuff that's indented, we can assume, right, is inside or has to do with the interactions with the equipment locker. Okay. I want to say that arrow, so now we have an arrow that's like a bent arrow. So first we have the equipment locker, it's got an unconscious person, and then what that unconscious person looks like, heavily patched vaccine, helmet off. That's all we get. So that's clearly, hey, you open the thing up, and that's your first thing inside. Now, granted, you could add more detail in there about is it a man, is it a woman? I guess it doesn't matter. Face, whatever. Okay, but there's there. Now, I think with the arrow is like, well, hey, are you interacting with that? Like, so you present that to the party once they've opened up the equipment locker, and now the next part is kind of like, hey, we interacted with it. Okay, great. So presumably you wake them up, but maybe not. I don't know if it's just, I guess it's up to you as the GM. What if they're doing helps them regain consciousness, or maybe if they're rifling their pockets, whatever. But hey, they wake up, okay, and they explain that, oh, my partner and I, we found this artifact that's on page 62, but yeah, they knocked me out and left me for dead. Okay, great. And then we have another indented piece here that, hey, the artifact is stashed in a random location, which I guess we figure out on page 21. And then the final bit is that, okay, and I don't know we're just seeing this little glimpse. So the one thing is they're not named, which is interesting. I don't know if I'm supposed to name them, but there's a note about nobody has heard of this person passing through the bell. I guess the bell is the name of this location, because that's the thing, looking at this out of context, I'm like, what's the bell? I'm guessing if you run in this, you know what the bell is. You're in the bell, it's whatever. Okay. And nobody's heard of these people. And I guess that's not something we should just belt out to the party, but maybe, again, I don't know gradient descent. Can you go to comms, say, hey, Smithy, or I don't know, hey, pal, and can you run through the comms, run through the computers and check on these two passengers or whatever, and then you send off, and then nobody's in the passenger manifest, or I don't know, but we get that little note about them. That's the one piece that seems a little bit oddly put, just the way it is, because it's not, it's kind of on the same level as the equipment locker, but it's not a thing. I don't know why they didn't indent it or do something with the person, but anyway, that's a note. But that part being a little bit, it's like, oh, that's a little weird way of putting it, but okay, I can read it pretty quickly and get it. So as Croco mentions, it seems fine, including the last part, but yeah, we're missing some context. The last part's a little bit odd, but it's not it's not really off-putting. It's just like, okay, it's not directly gameable. Like they gotta figure that out somehow. I don't know if I would put that piece of information in that spot, but it probably, maybe there's nowhere else to put it. It works. It's fine. So otherwise, okay. But I feel like we've got us looking at it now without any background in the module, not knowing anything about Mothership. I think we got a pretty good read on what's going on in the room. It's not that complicated. Ian says they're pretty conservative on reading through Mothership modules since they're not the only GM in the group running it. Yes, that makes sense. All right. So now here's what the author of the blog now is responding to this design. The key is written as a mystery. It's intriguing on the page, but a little confusing for a new warden. And I think that's nothing clear, right? They're not saying new to running games. They're new to the system, so there's part of that too. The implication here is that the NPC is one of the infiltrator androids created on the station. Otherwise, the situation makes little sense. I wish Gearing had spelled it out. When I was running this, the android angle wasn't totally obvious to me because I hadn't yet internalized the adventure's themes. Remember, this is one of the first rooms. I ran it fine in the end, but with a sense of uncertainty. Okay, so we don't know about any Android type stuff. And I mean, yes, if the idea here is ultimately that this is an Android, then I think, Luke Gearing's done some interesting things. Like we read through the Isle, and I think part of the thing with the Isle is they wanted it to remain a mystery for the GM and the players. So I think this may be working as intended. In other words, yes, you are uncertain because you don't know. Because I mean, it could be. I don't know if it's because they didn't get the themes or because it's just not here yet. I think the idea here is maybe you don't need to know. You're not meant to know because he's trying to make this. I think the idea here is he wants to make it engaging for you as a player warden, right? You are the warden, you're running the game, but you're also a player. And part of where the fun you might imagine for this is that you're getting to discover stuff too as your party's going through, just as they are. So they don't say, hey, they don't tell you up front, oh, this is an android, but they just say that you can't find this person. These people aren't on the manifests or whatever records, which is probably going to lead you to think, as the players might think, like, well, what's going on here? And then, they're androids. Like, I don't know about the android bit because I don't know gradient descent, but that might be it. So I know he's done this in some other adventures he's written, so maybe he's doing something similar in that, trying to, and there was that other one we read for Delta Green that I think definitely had that, where it's kind of written where everybody's kind of getting to experience the mystery, even the GM, as you're kind of going along. You'll notice the lack of specific details and reliance on tables. It's kind of fine here because this is a room any warden can reasonably expect their players to visit in session 1 and can prepare accordingly. However, if you come across this sort of writing where you haven't had a chance to prepare, it becomes a bit of a warden trap. The module is sprinkled with these. The random search table has entries for maps, so you better have those prepared. There are random artifacts in the form of statues and poems, of what the module doesn't say. There are random encounter rolls that might suddenly challenge your understanding of the fiction. Why are Cloud Bank employees wandering here? There were a few times I had to pause our sessions because of random roll results. And I think this is definitely a stylistic kind of thing. I think some people are going to really dig on that, like, oh man, why are Cloud Bank? And that's like, again, that's like this mystery. Like, ooh, why are they here? I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what Cloud Bank is, but it sounds cool. Like, ooh, what are these guys doing here? What is this guy doing in the impact zone? Like, we don't know. We got to figure it out. Like, oh, but this is interesting. And the thing is, often with things, you don't have to know. And I think part of it, again, it's a style thing, is this idea of letting go. If I'm running a random encounter, and I'm just going to use the D&D example because I'm just more knowledgeable in the fantasy part, just, whatever in terms of this. If you're running a dungeon and out of left field, it's like drow show up. To run the encounter, I don't necessarily need to know all about why the drow showed up. I mean, I might want to figure out quickly, like, I mean, probably some of it would help me and inform. But if let's say this text I'm running of this adventure says nothing, it's just 2D, like they would in old 2D4 drow. It's like, ooh, why are they here? I don't know. But for the first part of the encounter, I don't really need to know. They're going somewhere. Are they after the party? Maybe I might want to discover. Are they after the party? I mean, that's where you can roll a reaction roll. Oh, they're friendly, they're hostile, they're whatever. Oh, okay, what are they doing? Right? I don't know. And then as the party progresses, do they defeat the drow? In which case, they might start asking questions like, where the heck do these drow come from? Or why are they here? And then we do have to think of something. Or do the drow run away? Like, whatever happens, right? Obviously, it helps to know things. But at the same time, having limited information doesn't... there goes my webcam keeps shutting down on me. Having limited information can be okay. But new warden, new system, I get it. And not everybody rolls with that kind of approach, because that's like, for me, I don't mind sometimes just says 1d4 goblins, because I'll decide what the goblins are there. I'll roll a couple dice. I got a couple of little oracle table things. I'll roll on there really quick to see what they're doing. But I also get it that why couldn't someone just say, what are they doing here? And I also think I've also been feeling that way about the table. Like, I love random tables and all that stuff, but for home use, if I'm running the adventure, if I'm running gradient descent, what does the randomness in some of these things do for me? Right? If I'm running this adventure and I plan to run it basically once for this group, and you're like, you can decide like which one of these 36 locations the MacGuffin's in. Who cares? I'm running this once. Just give me one location where everything's set up and I can just say, okay, the MacGuffin's over there. What difference does it make if I don't need 35 other locations? I only need the one. I just need one location to put the MacGuffin. I don't need this thing of like, oh, the artifact that's stashed in a random location. No, just give me one. Like, how often am I going to, how often am I going to be running this? It's, you know what I mean? Even because the other thing is, like, I'm on the GM and I just love this game. You could put a note in there saying, oh yeah, here, by the way, is the one location we've written up for the artifact. But if you're running this for different groups, or you're running this in a campaign or like at a con or at a table and you want to run it multiple times, here's some other places you can put it, and here's some kind of changes. Boom, boom, done. Best of both worlds. You've given me something where I don't need to go over something or flipping rolls. Just tell me the artifact is in the kitchen or in the stateroom or in the toilet or wherever it is. And then if you want to give me some other options, that's fine. So I do agree there. I feel like sometimes we and I totally put myself in the same thing. I want to put in like, ooh, roll randomly for this. But it does just adds steps for a GM, a warden, or whatever to run that don't necessarily are not necessarily additive. It's like, look, it could be anywhere, but it's like I don't need anywhere. I just need one spot. Crocker says roll the location randomly every session. I mean, you could do that if you could have fun. I mean, honestly, for something like this, you could, because different people are ganking each other for the artifact. It's like it might be moved around. In this case, that might actually make sense. Okay, back to this thing here. There's a density of plot and procedures in Gradient Descent that made me think I need to stay on script, but at the same time, a lot of the room key leaves crucial specifics up to the warden. A more experienced warden can deal with that tension, but I was second-guessing myself and flipping pages in the module looking for clarifications that weren't there. Yeah, I can get that. It's that style piece again. Next header, Funhouse content. And then some of the stuff just didn't make sense to me. Going back to my preference for modules with strong verisimilitude, I thought I was getting into a BioShock type of thing, where the location has a clear logic and history, where the environment tells the story, and where players are drawn further into the mysteries of the place. Gradient Descent hints strongly at this sort of design. The setup is really strong. The overall layout of the location makes sense. So do the motivations and relationships of the various factions, mostly. But it's only when we started playing that I realized that when you drill down to the room key, this turns into a bit of a disconnected funhouse dungeon at times. Here's a room that connects 4 areas related to the space station's oxygen systems and trash disposal. All right, O2, right? That's oxygen, right? Okay, so this is labeled, again, I'm reading there from their screenshot, 59B, 4-way intersection. Blood-stained, half-meter spikes cover the tunnel walls. Graffiti on floor. You can't take it with you. Now we have some warning, exclamation marks, and then red text. The spiked walls collapse on the crew if any of them are carrying an artifact. And then you make a save or 1 wound per round as spikes crush you. Moving spikes reveal tangled wires behind the walls. If the wires are destroyed, the spikes will retract. All right, so that's basically all the description you get, right? So basically, hey, spikes on the walls, graffiti saying you can't take it with you. And obviously, and if you have the artifact, literally they're trying to kill you. So there it is. And there are wires behind the spikes. You destroy the wires, the spikes will retract. Okay. And then otherwise, you're going to be trying to make saves and you're getting hurt. Now on to the author's commentary. Have these spikes been jury-rigged, or was this already an Event Horizon corridor back when the station was fully operational? Who set this up? What's with the graffiti? Why here? My players almost entered this room in one of our sessions, and I got to tell you, I'm glad they didn't, because I struggled running a room I can't reason out. I mean, so here's the thing again, like that, going back to the limited information. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but it's definitely something you can do. Quaco says, reads to me like someone set up recently. Yes, the tangled wires seems to indicate that this is some kind of jerry rig. However, it is a highly unusual one because there are other questions too. Now, granted, this is sort of sci-fantasy, I guess, but what is it about your art? Like, how are they detecting the artifact, right? Because if you don't have the artifact, it doesn't bother you. If you have the artifact, the things start to try to crush you. So that's a pretty good trick, right? It's not just a simple trap. It's a trap with some, magic or techno magic in terms of, hey, if they've got the artifact, kill them. If it doesn't, let them pass. So that's an interesting trick, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have done it. I don't know, right? But it does feel that way. But what I was going to say was, going back to the kind of limited information, is you as the GM, you don't need to really worry about that too much. What you need to worry about really is just, you describe the room, you put it there, the party will probably come up with all kinds of stuff. Now, I don't know anything about the factions, or maybe there are people in here who are adept at making metal spikes and mounting them on walls with some kind of hydraulic press. That's the other thing, right? They're not just there. There's a lot of machinery going on here that It could be if you start digging into it, like, wait a minute. So they got these spikes. They got some kind of detector module that's looking for the artifact. How do they know? Okay, maybe it's got some kind of radiation pattern or signature. That's sci-fi, fantasy, magic-y enough. Okay, it's got some kind of signature. And so we got this. So they got some unit somewhere that's doing that. And then they were able to bring some kind of press. What's pushing the spikes inexorably in? I'm not sure, but okay, it's got something like that, right? With some parties, they'll just deal with it and they'll be like, who? And they'll move on. And you never have to worry. They may never ask the question, or they'll be like, oh man, I can't believe who did that. I don't know. It was probably the Cloud Bank people or something. It's like, oh, okay. Who? Or yeah, Croco, the ship did it, right? Kind of like Event Horizon, like, oh my God, it's a ship, or the demon in the wires, whatever. They might not. Then other parties may very well be like, stop to go like, what the heck is going on? How did they do this? What is this? I like to think of it. I always thought of it, my version of this was always the first Independence Day movie, which my friends and I, we saw in the movie theaters, and we're like, oh, this is great. And then it was like, we're out in the parking lot and we started asking ourselves these questions, and the movie kind of fell apart. Because we're like, well, why did they do this? Why did that happen? Who? And it's like, this doesn't make a lick of sense. But I think ultimately what matters most is in the moment. And in the moment, you just roll with it. And because like I said, often the players will have their own ideas that they'll just glom onto that you never would have thought of. Like, oh my gosh, but we talked to that techno druid over on level 6, and surely the techno druid set this up, or whatever. Or they'll just be like, oh, okay, it's a trap. It's a trap ship. We get it. Trap ship. So it's one of those things where you can almost think, I don't want to say think too much, but sometimes you just got to let go of this stuff. But you also, I think their point is really, yourself, know thyself, right? Okay, this type of approach, this kind of thing doesn't work for me, so you don't play this. But they didn't know that this didn't work for them when they picked it up. All right, moving on. Later in that same session, the group ended up in a room where floating pseudo-flesh jellyfish attacked them. There's no reference to these jellyfish anywhere else in the module. It's not that I want an explanation for everything. Rather, the problem is that our group found many of these things arbitrary and inexplicable. It might be. Yeah. It might be. Pseudo-flesh jellyfish is pretty cool. But yeah, and that's another one of those things. Some parties just roll with it. Oh my gosh, pseudo-flesh jellyfish. And then others will be like, what the heck are they doing in some rando room? It makes no sense. Okay. Next heading, hostility. Finally, there's a bit of a nega-dungeon streak here. My overall sense was that the module discourages interaction with itself. For example, there's a lab on the 4th floor where players can appraise the artifacts they found. This would be a really valuable find, except that it takes days to analyze an artifact, there's a chance of accidentally activating the artifact, and the room they need to place the artifact in to begin analysis can only be entered by a hidden entrance from outer space. I get that this is survival horror, but at some point players just stop interacting with the world. I mean, yeah, it seems like a tough one. I wonder if the idea is like, well, maybe you could get it's kind of like, I think the idea is you could have the artifacts analyzed now or some later point. And if you want it now, you got to go through some things. But yeah, I can see how that's, because you want people to be curious about the artifact, these things they're finding. And so you might think like, hey, do you want to have an easier way? Like, why would you have this thing be only entered from the outside? I don't have any context. Maybe we should go and read it. Another point. But yes, that seems like it's an interesting choice, but maybe there's something to it. The meat streak combined with the funhouse randomness, combined, of course, with not playing often enough, meant that my players were disengaged and just hated the place and wanted to leave. The experience of the module was often just exploring punishing room after punishing room for not much reward, in loot or information. I mean, that's definitely in danger with any kind of dungeon or mega dungeon, is that you can go through, like, the treasures can be hidden, information can be hard to come by, and it really is a gauge of and a stylistic thing of how much punishment does your player want to, how much punishment does the party want to take for some kind of whatever reward they think is coming before they just go like, the heck of it, we're out of here. Cargo says, seems like a safe place if it's that well hidden. I mean, it does. I mean, yes, that's maybe true. But it's definitely an interesting choice to be like, to find this room, you have to go on the outside and find a secret entrance. But again, I don't have context. I don't know what clues there might be that there is some kind of other hatch, or I don't know, whatever's going on there. I don't know if it's that there's some other entrance, but it's just blocked or locked or crushed or something. So you know it's there, but you got to figure out, well, we know it's here, but we can't get in from this way. Should we try to go spacewalk outside? Not sure. Lessons learned. I assume gearing values evocative writing over ease of use at the table. This is the guy who wrote Volume 2, Monsters and. That's a worthy approach, and his ideas are good. He leaves things open in ways that pull you in as a reader, like the mystery of the unconscious person. And he's capable of gnarly horror tableaus in the individual room keys. Gradient Descent is amazing to read, but it's not for me, and it fell flat at our table. I was missing the connective tissue. I didn't have the juice as a warden to pull it all together, and my players were lost. My takeaways from this failure. First, if your sessions are sporadic, density and mystery will fall flat. I mean, that's true. If you can't play very often, then you can't connect. It's hard to connect the sessions together. Like, oh, we played a month ago. What were we doing? You could spend half the time trying to recap what happened, and then you're going to miss some details. Those details might actually be important for this session or even sessions in the future, but you forget about them because you haven't been playing. It puts a lot of pressure on that, and it's easy to just become disassociated from what we were doing because you're not in it enough. It's too sporadic. Carker says depends on how much outside space wandering is part of the game, I guess. Excuse me. Yes. I mean, right. So we don't have context for that. I don't know. Okay, next bullet. Don't let presentation prestige misguide you. An adventurer's writing style probably remains the same in a glossy product as it does in a Word doc. Oh, I have hiccups. That's definitely true. I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing to say people love this adventure, so maybe I should read it, but I guess do your research, understand who you're buying. And yeah, there's a lot of Luke Gearing stuff out there, so you can probably get a pretty good idea of what his style and kind of things he does before you spend coin on it. But not everybody, not going to have that advantage with everybody. He just has a pretty large library of stuff, a fair amount of which I think you can get to, or at least some of which, like that Delta Green module that we went over a while ago, that was just on his blog. So easy to read. An adventure can be unrelentingly hostile for only so long before players disengage, and a module reading well doesn't mean it'll play well. I definitely agree with the last one. A module reading well doesn't mean it'll play well. That's absolutely true. Some will read exceedingly well, not play well. Some will read poorly, but play well. There's a whole spectrum of things here. And then again, this is a style thing. Some people are going to get into it. Some people really enjoy that kind of the horror aspect, the driving towards a goal, and oh my gosh, the tension of just making it, kind of like playing as a Space Marine in an Aliens type game where you're going, or is it something else, right? And that's kind of where you have to match up your group with the system and the module. If you're into it for looking for the kind of rewards and things like your sort of ye old adventures, then maybe playing something. And I don't know Mothership's background, what exactly you're chasing, but if you were into playing a game like you were a Space Marine, there aren't too many rewards. At least I have to read through the Aliens RPG again, the one from Free League, but it's basically, you're a Space Marine, you're going to do it. The idea of coming in and coming out with riches, it's not really the game. You're there to fulfill objectives, and you might be doing it in very hostile environments. That's kind of the thing. I mean, Twilight 2000 might be a case of that. It's like your reward might be getting some extra ammo and not dying and surviving to live another day. That's your reward, as opposed to kind of like, I'm going to come in with the riches of, I'm going to be wealthier than the dreams of avarice and stuff. It's like, well, that's D&D type thing, but not here. So maybe a Mothership adventure, or maybe this one, just because of that mismatch of expectations, might not be what you want. Okay. The Mothership campaign continues on. We're having a good time. We added a player, are playing more often, and I'm running through homebrew adventures more suited to my preferences. All right. That was great. So thanks to that person for the Krako says the reward is a good story, maybe. Yeah, or at least a memorable, right? The reward is a memorable experience, because all that other stuff is ephemeral. Doesn't really matter. Like, oh, I got a +1 sword. It's like, okay. In a couple of years, you're on your whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's not a real thing. You can't bring the real world. But what is the real thing is the memories of that real time you had coming together as a table to play games. Okay. Let's see. What else we got here? I don't know. Critical hit checklist. GM day sale. Okay. We're going to go back. All right, let's see if we got anything else. We have a little bit of time. Oh, no, I guess that's about time. Let me see if I want to do one more. Can I do one more? Come on. Give me one more. Give me one more. Something. This one's not actually. I did read this one already. It wasn't actually as interesting. It's kind of like who controls your retainers. Like, okay, you can control them. Your party, there's a couple of options. You control them. Your party control them, or nobody controls them. Pick which one you want. Let's see. Pricing, player housing, and Dolmenwood. I don't care. Just pick something. You ever want to play an elf struggling with alcoholism and abandonment trauma? I can't say that I have. Okay, hair golem, that's cool. Oh. How do you handle player characters that want to rush? Okay, this one might be interesting. Let's see. This is posted by One Page Nerd yesterday. So I've been a GM for quite a while, but I've finally got a chance to run an OSR one-shot, Basic Fantasy 4th Edition. It was a prison escape with 2 players. They had been caught and thrown into a pigfolk prison where their weapons getting confiscated. They still had their equipment. They found a way to, I think they mean escape, not escas as a name. They found a way to escape and tie up the guard. While one player was asking him questions, another, a dwarf, opened the door without checking for sound, saw 2 other guards who noticed him, closed it, and run inside another with the other player following right after. They basically barricaded themselves in that room and had no way to escape. I decided that the guards untied the other one and set an ambush outside of the room, resulting in 2 free attacks and a pretty hard combat with one player being at 1 hit point and the dwarf player being at low hit points as well. When I asked the dwarf player later for his reasoning, he said that his character was brash like a typical dwarf and would rush to find a way out. Did I handle the situation correctly? How can I explain to the players in the future that they need to be more cautious and think stuff through? So, okay, here's what I would say. You don't need to tell them anything. Hopefully, this episode here will make them realize maybe we should listen to dwarfers. Now, let me give I don't want to say let me give credit where credit's due. Let me just say there is a pretty good probability that he goes up to the door, listens at the door, doesn't hear anything, opens the door, and still gets spotted. Okay, that's not like such a slam dunk. Like, oh my, like that. This particular scenario is not that crazy from the player perspective. They tie someone up. And there's a lot of things we don't know. How many doors were there leaving? What do they have? So, because you can roll on that listen at doors and miss. So this to me is not like, oh my gosh, they did this horribly stupid thing. Like he didn't jump into a lake filled with undead or something. Like he didn't do that. They didn't open the door. And I don't mind. I don't think your OSR game is like you can't be brash. No, you can't. You just things are going to happen to you. But sure, be brash. And these are the stories that end up being. This is going to be a fun story, depending on how it plays out. It's how they got barricaded in a room and all this stuff happened. This is a fun story. So this is not as bad. I think this person's looking at like some gross failure of the players of planning or whatnot. But it's not, because one roll. Basically, what is it? A 1 or 2 in 6 chance of listening to the door. They had a pretty good chance that they were going to pop that door open and get spied anyway. So, no part. As Croco says, seems like it worked out. Yeah. So they opened the door brashly, I guess, but they had to open the door. The thing is, like, they had to open the door anyway, unless, again, context-wise, if the idea was he's going to go to that door, he's going to listen, he's going to hear guards, so therefore they're going to go to the other door. Okay, but you can't, again, there's too many variables. This is where I feel like maybe the GM is a little stuck on here's the thing they're going to do, and it's got a specific route planned out, but that doesn't work. You can go left, you can go right. The players don't know. They go right. Okay, yeah, they didn't listen, but that again, you're rolling dice, you might have failed. Anyway, open the door, there's guards. Oh, okay. Now, yeah, they went and they barricaded themselves in the room. Bad move. The guards came back, decided to ambush them. Fine play. I would probably think about, well, why are they captured, right? So here's maybe the other thing, which I think is where they're getting a little bit stuck. This is, I'm intuiting here a little bit. So here's my intuition. You're prisoners. You need to escape. All right, great. Why are you prisoners? What was going to happen to you if you didn't escape? Because they didn't escape. Or maybe they haven't. Or maybe they have. I don't know. It says they're low hit points. Maybe they did finally get out. Quagga says you could, in fact, rule that the rushing negates the guard's surprise. Yeah, you could. I mean, there's all kinds of rulings you can make. What were they going to do? Now, I would say is you should have some kind of secondary thing here of, okay, this is an escape scenario, but the party doesn't escape. So what happens, right? So now they're back in, and I don't know where they barricade themselves. They're just back in their cell. I don't know, whatever. trapped. Maybe they get out. Maybe they're recaptured. I would go to something like, if you remember Army of Darkness, they capture Ash and they take him in and he's about to get out. Or is he like, did they knock him in the pit? I don't remember what happens, but they basically throw him in the pit. That'll be step 2. Like, all right, we had to do the cell. Now you've done this other nonsense. We're just dropping you in the pit and there's something down there that's going to try to kill you, and go to. Like, that would be my backup. But have some other plan, because I think basically it's like, well, if it's just they're going to get locked up, because as the GM, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just starting the scenario, and I wanted to start with them in jail, escaping, but now they fail to escape, and now they're back in jail. So basically, we're just going to run it back again. Like what? Like, how can I change it? And so you want to have something else there. So yeah, now they did escape, and they were recaptured. So now the people, whoever the authority, whoever's done this recapturing, which we also don't know, is going to be, is going to be thinking like, you know what? These troublemakers, that didn't work. Well, we got to do something else. We got to up the stakes. Now drop them in the pit, which can be your first dungeon of, okay, if you get out of the pit, which then maybe leads out of town. So it's basically a way of saying you survive, either you die or you're exiled. We don't care which one it is. Then kind of have your starting thing. But you have a backup plan. Have a backup plan for if things don't work out, because they're not always going to work out. But this is not like a horrible thing. I mean, we've seen players do. Everyone has seen their fellow players, or whether they're running games or playing games, do ridiculous things. And you're like, why did you do that? This is not that bad. You're in a hurry. You're playing in the moment. You just throw open that door. And I think it's kind of funny. Throw open the door, see the guards, and nope, close the door. Then maybe they could have figured out how to lock the door or jam. That's where if you had a spike, maybe you spike the door so they can't get in. Whatever. But you can have some fun there. It's not that big of a deal. But have a backup plan. And then see about how you can change it up, because you don't want to just have another jailbreak. You gotta raise the stakes. You gotta move things along. So I like the idea of having some kind of pit, some kind of thing like, oh yeah, we're gonna toss you in here and now get out. And it's a little bit harder than it would have been, or at least fictionally. It doesn't have to be behind the screens, but at least from the town's perspective. Remember, it's like, oh, now you've done it. Now you're gonna throw you down there with some, I don't know, flesh-eating witch who's running around some sewer down there, and the only way out is through her and out the other side, but you can't come back up because we're shutting the lid and hammering it shut. So goodbye and farewell. And on that note, goodbye and farewell. Have a great rest of your day, night, whenever you end up watching or listening to this. Game on, everybody. And I'll talk to you later. Bye now.